So this is a point of life to embrace. And we want to move forward into this new lifestyle rather than looking back and wishing we were where we were when we're 20.
Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, a podcast helping women in career and life transitions achieve clarity on their next steps so they can transform uncertainty into an energizing next chapter. I'm your host, Kavita Ahuja, and the founder of It's My Time Now Coaching. If you're wondering what's next in your career or life, you are in the right place. Through solo and guest episodes, you'll gain practical tips, tools, and inspiration to help you uncover blocks, gain confidence, and be, do, and have what you want. I rediscovered myself after the age of 50, and I know you can too. It's my time now to help you do just that. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, and Happy New Year. I hope you had a fantastic holiday season and are looking forward to all that this new year brings for you. If you've been asking yourself, what's next for me? Then you are in exactly the right place. I'm so thrilled you're here to kick off a fresh chapter and to dive into the possibilities of what this year and this stage of life can bring. In today's episode, we're talking about something that impacts every woman over 40, your hormones and your health. If you felt like your body isn't responding the way it used to, whether it's stubborn weight gain, fatigue, or just not feeling like yourself, you're not alone. And the good news, you don't have to settle for this is just part of getting older. Today's guest, Dr. Betty Murray, is here to share game-changing insights from her 20 plus years of experience as a functional medicine practitioner, nutrition expert, and researcher. She's going to bust some myths about menopause and midlife health, uncover the real reasons why so many of us struggle during this transition, and show us how to take control of our vitality without deprivation or burnout. So whether you're thinking about your health, your career, relationships, or the next big thing in your life, this conversation is more about just hormones. It's about reclaiming your energy and purpose in midlife and beyond. So grab a coffee, a notebook, or just some time for yourself. And let's start the new year by giving you the tools and inspiration to reinvent your life starting right now. Stay tuned. This is going to be an episode you don't want to miss. Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention Podcast, a career and life transitions podcast. If you're asking yourself what's next, you are in the right place. I interview incredible women across the globe for this podcast who share their stories of reinvention and who will give you their insights and expertise on how to rediscover who you really are, what you really want, and how to get there in your next stage of life. This week, I'm thrilled to have on the show Dr. Betty Murray. Dr. Murray is a leader in women's health and has over 20 years of expertise as a PhD, researcher, certified functional medicine practitioner, and nutrition expert. Her groundbreaking discoveries have uncovered the root causes of hormone and metabolic imbalances affecting women over 40. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Murray. Can I call you Betty?
Oh, please call me Betty. Please,
Okay.
please.
Okay.
Happy to meet you. This is great.
How are you doing?
I'm wonderful.
So lovely to have you on the show. I really appreciate your time and being here. And I just love your mission. And I think it really suits well with the audience who's listening, who could gain a lot of your experience and expertise. So just let's dive in. Speaking about your mission is to radically change the health of Americans. And you're especially focused on helping women fix their hormones and their metabolism and help them live this extraordinary life. So if you just kind of maybe back up a little bit and tell us, where did this passion come from for helping women in their health? And is there anything personally that led you to this type of work?
Yes, actually, multiple things. So I would say I'm first of all ambipassionate. So if women aren't listening and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I want to do five different things," I'm your girl. I'm,
Okay.
I'm yeah, I
Yeah.
like variety in my life. But I really started my career and I actually wanted to be a physician, except I was working full time and going to school full time. And I started looking at that school trajectory and the loans, right? The amount of money I would need, da, 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 da. And I
Yeah.
also liked business. And so I really struggled with should I go there, should I not? I ended up sort of pivoting in the late 80s, getting into sales and marketing and kind of went out into the world and did that for a while, moved all over the country, moved back to Texas and got swept into the technology boom in the early 90s. So for those of us listening, we all remember the dial-up days.
Yeah.
So I have a very strong skill set for understanding very complex things, seeing patterns that other people don't see. That's a little bit of my superpower. And so I ended up kind of getting swept into it unexpectedly. And I ended up getting a bunch of different certifications, bringing my kind of business background to that world, and was hired to work for the CTO of a company as the first female. And it was a brutal environment. It was working 100 hours a week, being underpaid and overworked with a lot less resources than my male peers. And I had digestive problems that would come and go when I was younger, but they became more and more frequent, more and more damaging. And I ended up being diagnosed later on with colitis, and which is a digestive disorder. It's autoimmune, usually progressive in nature. And the conventional treatment is immunosuppressive drugs or steroids. And so when I was left with that as the answer, it was kind of like, okay, here's your answer, just take these meds. And I
Yeah.
asked, I thought was a legitimate question. Could I change my diet and have any change in the trajectory of this disease? And the doctor laughed in my face and told me it had nothing to do with what I ate. And that didn't sit well with me. It's like, it
Mm-hmm.
seems so strange. It's an autoimmune condition with your gut. So I started taking health classes and nutrition classes. I went back to get a master's. And that's when it clicked in. I was like, oh, this is why I didn't go to med school, because I really wanted to understand nutrition. So I
Mm.
masters, I go out and sort of start my own private practice. And then I opened Living Well Dallas as one of the first multi-specialty clinics in Dallas that had doctors and nutritionists and health coaches and counselors and all of those things under one roof in 2006. And then I hit my late 30s, moving into my 40s. And it was like a light switch one day. It was like everything that had ever worked to make me feel well prior to that. Like if I overate a little bit and gained a few pounds, I could go to the gym, cut back, quit eating junk for a week, and I would be able to lose weight. And I gained 35 pounds almost overnight in 6 months. My hair started falling out. I started getting acne on my chin. I never really had acne prior. I couldn't sleep. Insomnia was terrible. I got onto this basically hormonal roller coaster ride. And I had access at that time to some of the best minds in functional medicine. So the people that, if somebody listens to these kind of things, they're the podcast hosts, the PBS specials, those individuals. And I'm in that community. And
Yeah.
my entire decade of my 40s was terrible. And then actually, I was on this hormonal sort of roller coaster of perimenopause, a lot of which everybody thought I was a little too young for, or no, those symptoms aren't part of it, which led me back to get another master's and then finally my PhD in my research. And for me, that really galvanized what this next session and next sort of season of life is
Mm-hmm.
women pay a price for being female, right? We suffer autoimmune conditions 10 to 1 to men. Our life expectancy is longer, but our health span is actually shorter and worse. So we live longer, more crappy, right? Really, honestly, we have a 1 in 4 for dementia,
Yeah.
right? We have a 1 in 6 for dementia. We have a 1 in 2.5 chance for a cardiovascular event, heart attack or stroke, and more likely to die from it than a man. And it's all because we have sex hormones that happen to decline radically in menopause. And it's the loss of those hormones that have a full body effect. And so that's really why I do what I do now. Is
Mm-hmm.
my goal is to help women in this season of life maximize their health so they can live into that next purpose and passion, because most of us have this burning desire and we now are in this position where everything about our biology is telling us to step into this next generation of ourselves. But most of us feel like crap, can't sleep. We're tired, angry, irritable,
Yeah.
and have a lack of zest for life anymore. And so that's really where I
Yeah.
am. And it's a long, circuitous route, but that's how I got here.
Wow. Well, I just love the way you because when you were diagnosed with colitis, and then you were like, nope, that's not the right answer. And so you did the research, you got your master's, and then you got your second master's and your PhD. And it's phenomenal that you wanted to really understand the basis for all this. And now you're helping women, like, and those stats are quite depressing, I would say. True, depressing, but true. And it's wonderful that there's people out there like you who are understanding and the real cause, the real root cause of these things. And so I guess that question would be these metabolic and hormonal imbalances that you described, they're beyond the traditional understanding of menopause, right? So what were some of you described some of them, but what are some of these, when you're doing your research, some of these aha moments when you found out that really nobody else was talking about at the time?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. So the myths that women have been told, particularly in the last 2 decades.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that women need to know is that up until 2002, from the 50s forward, bioidentical, or not bioidentical, but truly hormone replacement was standard of care for women. So women who entered into perimenopause and menopause from conventional care were put on hormones from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, up until the early 2000s. And it was really the Women's Health Initiative, which the committee misrepresented their data and basically lied without reproach about basically hormone replacement causing breast cancer and causing heart attack and stroke, and which their own data actually did not show. And especially upon follow-up, 8-year follow-up, 18, 20, and 22-year follow-up, none of their assertions held true. So most women have been told that the hot flashes and night sweats are the hallmarks of menopause. And that's really the only thing you need to worry about. It's annoying. You get sweaty, you get hot, and that's it. But there's, depending on who you look at and what study, there's 69 to 100 different symptoms of menopause, because menopause is a full body, every tissue, every organ, every cell except for 2 in your body have estrogen receptors. It is a full body experience. And every single part of your body feels the loss of those hormones. Just because you don't have symptoms doesn't mean that there isn't something going on. I've never had a hot flash or a night sweat. That was not any of my symptoms, but I definitely had other ones, predominantly things like insomnia, irritability, joint pain and fatigue, weight gain, abnormal weight gain that could not be explained by calories in, calories out, exercise, and reduced caloric intake. The simple math equation just didn't add up.
Right.
And we know now, because that's not true. That's not what's really happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't think about it, right? You don't think that it's, like you said, it's a full body experience. And I was just thinking as you're talking, yeah, I had a bit of the night sweats, but mine was also weight gain, and it was hair loss. It's still losing it. So yeah, it seems like that this myth that it's just night sweats and hot flashes, and so that's really unfortunate, because then women, even if they have these other symptoms, they don't seek the help. They just think it's just going to go away, right? So that's really unfortunate if you think about it. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that you're doing what you're doing, right? So what are these, accepting these symptoms of aging, like weight gain and fatigue? So how do you respond to them? Like who's tell you that? They come in and say, this is these cultural narratives, and how do you help them kind of shift those beliefs that this is more than that, and how to survive how to thrive rather than just survive what they're going through?
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost, I'm a PhD, so I'm what I call the nerdy side or the scientific side of medicine. I don't actually personally prescribe, right? As a PhD, we don't do that, but I have prescribers that work for me. And the things that are important, I think, for women to understand is bioidentical hormone replacement. So first, bioidentical, in case you've never heard that before, means that it is identical chemically to what your body naturally makes. So think of your hormones as each individual keys. And on your cell, you have a lock that's for that estrogen key or testosterone key or progesterone key. When it is bioidentical, it is identical, like you took it to the Home Depot or whatever and had them make a duplicate key. And so it's exactly like what your body makes. So it works on the lock normally. Pharmaceutical companies have no interest in making bioidentical hormones because they can't patent it because it is as it is found in nature. So we don't see a lot of bioidentical hormones available. So there is oral progesterone now, and there is topical estradiol in a patch made by conventional pharmaceutical companies, but it's not commonly used. And depending on where you are, like I know you're in Canada, it's a little harder to get than even in the United States, but only depending on the study you look at, 1.83 to 7%, depending on the study, of women in menopause are actually receiving treatment, appropriate treatment.
Really?
Right.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So bioidentical hormones are replacing what your body naturally made. Now, in those studies, so in the Women's Health Initiative, actually the ones that were on estrogen, oral estrogen, that was actually not even bioidentical, had a 23% decreased risk of breast cancer, not increased at all. And as a menopausal woman, you have a 4 in 1,000 chance of having breast cancer. Now, statistically, compared to those other things I reeled off, breast cancer is the least of your worry, but it's the thing we hear about the most, right? Average age
Because it
of
seems the
diagnosis,
scariest, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems a scary,
Yeah.
disfiguring, brutalizing, but the reality is we have a much lower risk for that. But as a menopausal woman, your risk is dramatically higher than what it was when you're 20. Having more children, having children earlier, having your menstrual cycle longer, i.e., meaning your hormones are higher for longer, actually reduce your risk. So what never worked for me was that idea that your hormones caused cancer magically after 50. Like, they're safe for you when you're cycling, even if you might have a hellish period. They're totally safe for us to give you really high doses of birth control to control your fertility. But something magical happened at 50, and that same hormone that your body made was automatically now deadly. Like, because I'm a logical person. And I was like, okay, that just hold water, because otherwise 20-year-olds would be getting breast cancer at epically high rates. So when you dig into the literature, all the studies, there was a 10 million woman study looking at safety of bioidentical hormone replacement over 65 that just published this year. Every case, heart attack, stroke, dementia, ovarian cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer, all of them, if you took hormones and continued to stay on them, you had a reduced risk for every single one of them. So the stuff that kills us, right? And so these are the things that women don't hear. And so when women are struggling, what they need to understand is all of those symptoms are sign that your body is struggling from the loss of those hormones. One of the most powerful things we can do is restore physiological levels of those hormones, so those receptors, the keyholes, are getting what they need so they can continue to operate. So for instance, that middle-aged weight gain that you and I both experienced. So statistically, the average woman will gain 10 to 15% of their body weight as they go through menopause, doing the exact same thing that they were doing before, right? So if you're a 150-pound person, that's somewhere between 15 to 20 pounds automatically. And most of that is fat that is underneath your muscle in what we call the visceral area around your organs, which is pro-inflammatory, causes diabetes and inflammatory conditions. And it does not, by the research, come off with diet and exercise. So when you go meet your trainer and they're like, you just need to work out harder, they're full of bullshit. Pardon me. It's not real, right? The reality is we have to address it differently than how we did it before because our body has changed. And so I think women need to be armed with that knowledge because we get gaslighted when we go to doctors. They go, oh, you're not sleeping, so here's a sleeping pill.
Yeah, yeah. So I heard you saying it's a hormone imbalance and that needs to be restored, but you don't think that it's exercise as well as diet that can also help with that?
It contributes. Yeah, it contributes. The research shows, at least it alone, so like, let's say
not
exercising,
alone, right?
Yeah, alone doesn't usually shift that weight gain underneath the muscle tissue.
Yeah.
Right? You have to work hard, differently. It's not just about that calories in and creating a caloric.
And it's also the right type, right? The right type of exercise, like that's heavy weight training, and versus going on the treadmill for an hour. I think it's the right type of exercise and then the right type of nutrition as well, right? But
absolutely,
yeah. So what about the psychological kind of impact that women, you've treated thousands of women who've come through your door, and what would you say, and also women who are listening to this podcast, what do you think, or what have you found has been kind of the biggest emotional barrier or psychological barrier to kind of getting through this, reclaiming their health? And how does you and your team, how do you help them in that kind of mindset, I guess, piece of it?
Yeah. So from a biological standpoint, just so everybody kind of knows the statistics. So the statistics are 1 in 3 women will experience anxiety as a side effect of menopause, and 1 in 5 will experience depression, meaning that it'll show up with no real known cause,
Mm-hmm.
right? You got to remember that these hormones are big communication molecules. They're much bigger than the brain chemistry we think about, like serotonin and dopamine. They're much,
Mm-hmm.
much bigger and cross body effect. But when we look at that, I think there's a multifold. So some of it is the biology. We have to understand what's happening with the biology. Oh, and then there's all these other things that sort of move into it too. So if we look at, often we are potentially empty nesting, or our kids are in this sort of final phase of becoming an adult, which is super challenging, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If not empty nesting. We may be caring for an ailing parent, or we're looking into that process, and we might be at the pinnacle of our career, and we may be looking across the couch to a spouse or partner that we've just spent 20 years raising children that we don't recognize anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of psychosomatic things that are happening now, and environmental things that also cause us to shift
Mm-hmm.
how we see the world, what we want out of the world. And then our brain's actually being rewired.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually shift, and our brain sort of shrinks actually a little bit. So the menopausal process shrinks the brain a little bit, but then at the same time, it sort of maps over to the more creative centers of the brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So often women will tell you when you start having these conversations, and I know you have these conversations every day, they're like, I don't find my career fulfilling anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I want to find my purpose, passion, need. I want to feel fulfilled and touch into my creativity. Cool if I can earn money at it, but I have this other calling, and I'm not quite sure how to address it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think some of that, I had a great conversation earlier today with a neuroscientist talking about why we go through that. Because in ancient societies, it was the matriarch, the older women of the tribe, that actually conveyed generational knowledge to the family unit, right? So we were
Mm-hmm.
actually the ones that made sure what was important stories to know that protected our survival as a species, the women were responsible for. So I think there's also this sort of millions of years, our
Mm-hmm.
bodies being developed to also experience this really uncomfortable time period
Yes.
of, oh my gosh, I need to reinvent myself. Damn it.
Yeah. That's exactly why we're here today. And yes, you're right. It's also connected, and I do see that every day. As and you know, we've also talked about on your podcast is this feeling that everything is happening at once. It's our health that is changing. It may be our careers that are going through a transition. As you said, our relationships with our spouses, our kids, our parents. Everything is kind of, it's like this whirlwind of things that are happening all at once, and it's like, how do we manage it? Firstly, I think you have to address it physically, but also from a perspective of really taking time to figure out who you really are and what you really want. And that's why I think our work is very supportive of one another, because there's a physical symptoms, there's the emotional, there's mental, all of it. You kind of built a movement around that, I think, in terms of what you do. And so how is your work in this area? How's it really kind of transformed how your own understanding of aging and resilience, and how we can survive and thrive as women in this stage of life?
Yeah. I would say I've changed so much over the last 5 years for sure, but I would say last 10 years. Up until that point, I was very, I would say energetically, very masculine in the world. Now, some of it is I was at one point was in IT in a all male company, all male
Yeah.
division of a company. Yeah, it was a brutal environment. And let's just say HR, thank God, never really knew what happened in that world to make it, to survive, right? To survive in that world. So I was very regimented and thinking, I'm just going to push through everything. I'm just going to keep
Hmm.
going. I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? I'll sleep when I'm dead. I don't need that. This very a very
Yeah.
energetic, being honest, a very energetically masculine sort of thing. And I think my experience of perimenopause made worse by some things that happened. I ended up having an ablation. So there's some other things that changed my body that probably accelerated the process.
Hmm.
But I think also as I was finally being confronted with, I wasn't honoring my femininity. So I like to talk obviously about the biology of the feminine and the biology and the physiology of what's happening in your body, because we can manipulate that not only with bioidentical hormones, but supplements, nutrients, exercise, lifestyle, all of those things. But I think the other part is also recognizing that you're never going to go back to where you were before because it's no longer valid and actually not where you need to be. Right. But we have to move this thing forward. And so I think for me, I had to actually embrace the feminine. And I went through this whole process. Like I started wearing dresses more. Sounds stupid, but it
No, it's
absolutely
not stupid at all. I
no, because I
understand.
was just like, when was the last time I wore a dress? I would take sort of selfies of myself feeling pretty and send it to my husband. Not for him. I didn't care if he looked at it at all. It was for me.
Yeah.
I take 50, you take 50 of them. You're like, okay, that one was good. I like that one. Send that. It was like stupid stuff like that. Like what sounded stupid to me at the time. It was embracing that. But then it was also embracing the stillness and a little more creativity and really sort of moving into that more intuitive side of my brain. And that I think has enabled me to think bigger, right? Take what I was doing at a much smaller scale in my clinic and now doing it across the nation. So we actually help women from all over. But it's also, how can I enable women all across the planet, right? Especially in an environment today that looks like our kind of our sovereignty over our own body may be challenged, particularly in the United States. And really think it's because I stepped into that femininity and sort of what does this next chapter need to look like? And then who am I in that chapter to enable those things to occur? Which I had to really like basically torch the old version of myself and recreate myself at the same time.
That's really important. And thanks for sharing that. I think it's maybe about torching the old self, but it's also about bringing the best parts of what you were and then bringing it forward. And I love the fact that you brought up this topic about embracing your femininity, because I think that's so important as women who are listening to not shy away from that. And this is powerful. And this opportunity that we have and this transition period that we're going through, as I talk about often, is an opportunity to reinvent yourself, yes, but also to figure out what is your reason for being, what is it, what's buried inside of you, like creativity or your passions, or what are you valuing now that you might have changed from the past. So these are all really important questions, and I think I'm really glad you brought those up. And for anyone listening, it's really important to take that pause, right? And you mentioned a little bit, Betty, about the healthcare system, and well, I know that you have, it's very, your mission is really wonderful. And you say that it's the current healthcare system, especially I guess in the United States, is not designed for women's needs. So tell us a little bit about that, how you're hoping that your work can kind of redesign it, and how close are you to helping with that, and what does that look like in your world, I guess.
In my world.
Yeah.
So I think it's women's health has always been sort of relegated down to what we call bikini medicine, reproductive importance, that basically women were seen as men with breasts and ovaries and uterus. So as a matter of fact, the clitoris, right, which is an anatomical part of a female body, wasn't even mapped out until like 15 years ago. I think it's like we actually did not actually have a working diagram of a anatomical part of a female body. That is
right?
Literally no joke.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And women in the United States were left out of studies until 1993. So we take drugs routinely as conventional care that were never tested on women. And we know that women metabolize and handle drugs differently than men because of our hormones. And so for the most part, women are reproductive only, and our only value is our fertility in medicine. We have a very patriarchal and misogynistic view of women, and we haven't been studied. And so all of that adds up to mortality rates that are higher, less health span, like just across the board. And so when I really started digging into that data, my ire, my anger, I will say at this time in my life at almost 55, I have 0 F's to give, and I'm very vocal about it. Right. Because before I'd been like, well, how can we find some conventional whatever? And then now I'm just like, no, burn it to the ground. We need to talk about it. So what we're trying to do is, so my telemedicine technology company is building basically a women's digital health platform where we're going to capture some symptom data, your laboratory data, your wearable data, because most of us are playing with wearable devices, along with your genetics, along with your treatment activities. So if you're doing bioidentical hormones or you have to do thyroid, we capture all of that data and even how we shift those doses. One of the things that has always bothered me is if you stand 10 women in a row, none of us look alike. None of us look alike. Curvier and shorter. Somebody else is tall and willowy. Your hormones drive that, right? So the idea that what hormone level you need to be physiological is identical to mine is not true. And so one of the biggest black holes in women's health also is if somebody is doing treatment, what's the right treatment level for her? So we're also capturing that descriptive data and what we call titration. So that's like, what's the difference? Because it's an art and a science at the same time. And then obviously we're there to help them from a telemedicine standpoint. We can work with people all over. And when we have that data, what we become is the largest repository of women's health data with the capacity to mine that data using tech, again, because I came from tech, using AI, using our advanced capacity today to understand patterns in the data that nobody's looked at because nobody ever bothered to do that. And we can answer things like PMDD or PCOS or osteoarthritis for women, or why women have such metabolic changes and gain weight and have fatigue. We'll be able to identify things that have never been looked at before. Like I looked at that problem and I was like, what do we have to build, design, or do to make that happen? And so I'm trying to raise capital for that, but that's ultimately what I want to do is instead of waiting for NIH and these large organizations that are beholden to the insurance companies and pharma to women, let's just take them out of the equation because they don't need to. And there's.
So thank you for sharing that. So what else, Betty, maybe you could tell us, our audience, what you're doing, what's next for you. This is huge, but what else where can they find you? And if they want more information on what you do, just share that.
Sure. Yeah. So if they're interested in getting help with their hormones, understanding where their body is, we believe in testing, not guessing. Don't fall for, hey, we're just going to give everybody the same dose and assume that that's working.
Right.
The easiest way is to go to gethormonesnow.com. So gethormonesnow.com, and you can find out about my company. The company name is Minerva. It's the Etruscan spelling of Minerva. She is the goddess of medicine, science, and war. And so that's the reason for the name. So Get Hormones Now is where you can find out more about the company. And then we're working on the technology build. If somebody's interested in that, they can look me up at bettymurray.com and just go to contact us and reach out to me. And then I've got my podcast, Menopause Mastery, where we talk about all of this stuff, including the biology and physiology too.
Yes. Fantastic. It's fascinating information. And I guess for women who are listening, who are in this transition period of life, whether it's experiencing their health changes that we've discussed in detail, or these other things with their careers, relationships, all of those transitions, maybe a last word that you would give, maybe a little bit of hope or a little bit of advice from your end, maybe just some last words.
Yeah. So I would say, first off, menopause is not optional. We all go through it. But suffering from the symptoms of menopause and the ongoing after effects are completely optional. And if you feel like your body has kind of betrayed you, you just need to know how to unlock the right things. Like you were saying, changing our exercise, changing our lifestyle, working on our sleep, and potentially doing bioidentical hormones. I don't think everybody needs to be on hormones, but I do think every single woman deserves the right to have that conversation about her own health. And the other thing we have to understand is there's a reason why women go through menopause and survive afterwards. We're one of only really, I think it's 6 mammals that actually survive after fertility. And literally the human race probably wouldn't have made it without us because we actually imparted knowledge. We took care of the children while the moms were out gathering, which accounted for 80% of the food, mind you, not the hunters. And the hunters were out hunting, right? The grandmas actually protected the environment of the tribe itself and had tribe cohesion. So this is a point of life to embrace. And we want to move forward into this new lifestyle rather than looking back and wishing we were where we were when we're 20. We're not 20. We're also way more brilliant and way more captivating than we were at 20.
Yes, way more sexy too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. Point of life to embrace. That's true. And I really want to dig into that more about the gathering piece and the history, the civilizations, and how I think that's fascinating. If you really look at it, it's such a lesson, so many lessons to learn from our ancestors, right? In that, so yeah, we could talk about that for a whole other,
Yeah, I mean,
whole
we
other.
have to remember that the youth-centric culture that we have, that youth and
Yeah.
superficial culture, is a new phenomenon.
Hmm.
More traditional society. So if you go to the Andes and find traditional peoples that are not westernized, or you go to Africa where they're not heavily westernized, women are revered as they
Hmm.
get older. They are seen as important and vital, and they're wise. Whereas here,
Hmm.
you're like, oh, you're tied up, washed up, invisible, which is BS, complete
Yes,
BS.
it is. Well, we'll end it on that note because I completely agree. Thank you so much for your time and for all this amazing information. And I've been encouraged anyone who's listening to reach out to Dr. Murray for all her insights. If you have any questions on anything you're going through, especially with around your hormones or your health, she's your gal. So thank you very much, Betty, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today for this powerful conversation with Dr. Betty Murray. I hope her insights have helped you better understand the importance of addressing hormonal and metabolic changes, particularly as we navigate midlife. Remember, midlife is not the end of anything, it's the beginning of a new phase where we have the opportunity to realign our health, our goals, and our purpose. Here are her key takeaways. Number 1, hormones are not just about menopause. They impact every part of your body, and understanding this connection can help you tackle symptoms like fatigue, weight gain, and mood changes more effectively. Number 2, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy is not only safe, but can also address the root causes of the challenges many women face in midlife. And number 3, it's not just about physical health. Career shifts, relationships, and self-discovery all play a role in redefining this stage of your life. The start of a new year is the perfect time to take charge of your health and your future. So if you're going through a career or life transition, or you feel stuck trying to figure out what your next step is, let's talk. Book a breakthrough call with me today so we can work together to uncover what's holding you back and create a clear plan to move forward. You can email me at kavita@itsmytimenowcoaching.com or visit my website at itsmytimenowcoaching.com to schedule your call. Let's make this year the one where you take action towards the life you truly want. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it. And remember, if not now, when?